there's such a big pie in the sky of like opportunity for, if we're talking acres, like just 5% of the United States commodity market. So mostly going to like corn, soybeans, wheat. If we just had 5% of that, then it's like 8 million acres. That's huge.
That's Morgan Elliott. She is the co-founder and chief operating officer at IND Hemp in Montana. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today I will talk to Morgan Elliott about the leadership role she plays at IND Hemp and the leadership role that IND Hemp plays in the grain and fiber sectors of the U.S. hemp industry. In full disclosure, IND Hemp is a sponsor of our podcast, but first, a few nuggets of hemp news. The USDA and the National Agricultural Statistics Service announced plans this week for their hemp acreage and production survey. It's going to collect information on acreage, yield, production, price, and value of hemp in the United States. This survey will provide needed data about the hemp industry to assist producers, regulatory agencies, state governments, processors, and other key industry entities. The survey will be mailed out to hemp producers across the U.S., and there will be an online portion of the survey that opens on October 18th. I'll have a link to more information on the show page for this episode. Here's an interesting opinion piece on thehill.com. The headline reads, "Rebuilding Haiti with Bamboo and Hemp." It starts off like this. "It is perplexing why Haiti, a seismically active country, continues to allow construction of dangerous concrete homes that collapse on residents during earthquakes. So many lives are being senselessly lost under collapsing concrete when there are environmentally friendly alternatives such as bamboo and hemp." It's great to see people waking up to the goodness of hemp and how it could impact people's lives in a very, very positive way. Here's something closer to home. There's a hemp research field walk scheduled for September 16th at the Penn State Research Farm in Manheim, Pennsylvania. So I'll put a link to that and all of these stories on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. Okay, and just one more thing. So as you probably know, this week and this weekend, it's the Southern Hemp Expo happening down there in Raleigh, North Carolina. So many great people are going to be speaking and expoing and all that good stuff. And I will be giving a presentation about my recent road trip. That's happening on Saturday, September 4th at noon in the ballroom. Hope to see you there. Okay, let's get into my interview with Morgan Elliott. Morgan Elliott, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good, Eric. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Could you introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, so my name is Morgan Elliott. I'm the co-founder of IND Hemp with my dad and his wife, Julie Elliott, Ken and Julie Elliott. And I'm our chief operating officer. So I'm located here in Fort Benton, Montana. And I make sure that the train keeps chugging along up here.
Okay, well, I've spoken to your dad a few times, because you guys are a sponsor for our show, so I thank you for that. And I've interviewed Greg Necco and Ben Brimlow. Greg is your brand manager, and Ben is your agronomist. But I am thankful to be talking to you today. Can you sort of tell me like where this company came from? Like, why did you and your dad and his wife decide to found this company?
Yeah, well, you talked to Greg and Ben, two all-stars in our company. So I'm really thankful for you to open that up and let them share more. But so for me and my story, dad has been in hemp for several years, 2014 probably really when I started getting into it. And I worked for Archer Daniels Midland before that. So I got my degree in chemical engineering from the University of Missouri and went to work with ADM in Illinois. And so I worked at a corn processing facility and then a soy processing facility. And so really got my feet wet in ag and food manufacturing. And so even back in 2014, when I was still at ADM, dad was talking to me about, hey, this hemp thing, I think it's come along. And we even had meetings with people at ADM, just, he's definitely the big visionary guy. And I'm always the one who's like, okay, how do we get from like point A to point Z when he's already at Z? And so in 2018 is when we started IND Hemp. So my mom passed away in a car accident in 2016, and I took some time off from work. Kind of after that, we started a nonprofit, a ministry in her honor. And so I left my role in my engineering career to really focus on the nonprofit and get it started. And I lived in a van for a year and traveled around, and it was just a really great time. Did a lot of soul searching, and then realized that you kind of need a job to make the bills get paid. So that's really when Dad kind of had me at a critical point. I was easily manipulated at that point. And that was right when the Farm Bill was about to pass. And so he was like, hey, I really think this has some feet underneath it. Like, why don't you just jump on a phone call with me and like, let's talk to someone. And I think it was a seed dealer that we talked to. It was like October of 2018. I was like, all right, twist my arm enough. And that phone call, just like getting to understand the business side of things and the full scale from like seed to processing to sales, really intrigued me. My engineering brain, like I'd want to problem solve. And so I was hooked from there. And then it was like pedal to the metal as fast as we could after that. And we kind of, the snowball effect definitely took into action like right after the Farm Bill passed. And so we started from like, hey, we're just going to do a little demo kind of trailer to like, we need full scale production capabilities. The farmers that we're talking to in Montana, because that's really where we started, was talking to these guys. What does it look like to do agriculture in Montana? We were talking thousands of acres. No one wanted to deal with a crop that was like a 5-acre plot. They wanted to grow 100 acres of it like tomorrow. And so to support that, we needed to have the infrastructure. And that's really where my expertise kind of came in, was like, well, I can build you a facility and like, we can process this grain. So yeah, we spent the rest of 2018 formulating the business. 2019 was finding equipment, talking with farmers. We grew about 3,500 acres in 2019, all with the intent of a processing facility that we were in construction of. And so construction started middle of 2019, and then 2020 is when we fired up our oilseeds plant.
Okay. How did you choose Fort Benton, Montana?
Yeah, totally a God thing. Honestly, we were supposed to be in Glasgow, which was near our nonprofit in Northeast Montana. The idea, hopefully we can someday make this full circle, was to provide jobs for the reservation. So we're located on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation, and we help support teachers up there. My mom was a teacher, and so that's kind of how that all plays into it. But it just didn't work. We tried really hard for several months to make Glasgow work, and the doors just kept shutting. So we quickly looked for other locations. We went to Havre, which is a couple hours west of Glasgow, still on the Highlands, North Montana, and that didn't work. And so we were really scrambling, and just someone happened to say, hey, have you talked to so-and-so? I think they might be selling their facility. And I was over in Europe actually looking at our equipment at the time. And I remember leaving for France and telling Dad, like, hey, you better go find us a place. Like, when I get back, there better be a location. And I think he took that to heart and was like, okay. So yeah, it's just a total God thing. We ended up in the right place and super thankful for it. Like you saw, Fort Benton's a great little town.
It is.
So yeah, it's like at the heart of the Golden Triangle. So when you're talking about like Montana agriculture, and hemp makes sense for row cropping up here. It's a great rotational crop following, a cereal or a legume. And so this is where most of the wheat and barley and like chickpeas and other things are grown in Montana, right in this region.
That's why it's called the Golden Triangle?
Yep.
Okay.
It's some of the most productive acres in Montana right here with that acreage there. So we just have access to really good farmers and good agriculture, and we complement the existing infrastructure that's here, right? So like in Fort Benton, there's 2 or 3 other value-added companies in ag. There's like a fertilizer company, there's a wheat processing company. And so like we just complement the existing infrastructure. And so farmers know how to talk to us. Like, we don't have to go through the conversation of like, hey, do you have an air drill? Do you have a combine? Do you have a bin? Like, we go into every conversation with farmers assuming those things, because that's what they do up here.
Right.
So it just fit for us. It like I said, a lot of it was right place, right time. And then my expertise of what I learned before in my previous life, and Dad's relationships and his knowledge base really just helped us to hit the ground running quickly. So.
And now, fast forwarding a couple of years, you have more than just a seed processing facility. You've got the fiber plant that's almost ready to be commissioned. Can you talk about how that came together? And am I correct in understanding that the town itself is sort of building like a industrial plant around you?
Yeah, it's awesome. So we always knew we would be in fiber in some capacity because from day one, right? Dad had guys growing for him back in 2015, and they were small plots, right? Like 10-acre plots. But like from day one, they're like, hey, what the heck am I supposed to do with this straw? It's kind of a pain in the ass. And so we knew we'd have to do something with it. But we just so happened to, I think it was Vegas of 2019, maybe 2020. I'm not sure the dates. It all is just a blur. I think everyone in the hemp industry just like woke up and like, oh my God, what happened to the last 3 years of my life? But we got connected with Sunstrand, and we're evaluating some of their equipment when they were just kind of going through their growing pains. And we decided that it made a lot of sense for us to have a complementary facility in Fort Benton that allowed us to not only process the grain, but also monetize that residual straw that our growers were working with. And so it was always a carrot that was out in front of us. We just didn't know that we'd be able to get there as quickly as we were. Again, definitely a right place, right time kind of thing. And Fort Benton has this great industrial park that has kind of been underdeveloped for the last decade or more. And it's right across the street from our oilseeds facility. And so when we started looking at the infrastructure that was needed to bring this equipment in and to process, we started talking with the city, and they said, well, hey, here's like this acreage that we can sell to you at a really good price. And we can help, we'll apply for some grants to get, water and streets and sewer and all that stuff. And so they were willing to go through the hard work to try and get some infrastructure set up there. And that's still in progress right now, but it's just exciting to see that the community would jump at the opportunity to support, a really big project. Fort Benton's only about 1,500 people. We have surrounding farmers and ranchers that make up probably another, 1,500, but the community itself is pretty small. We're about 40 minutes outside of Great Falls. So that's like our local airport, Walmart, things like that. And so it's awesome to see the opportunity and value-added agriculture businesses so highly valued by the community, because they live, they're neighbors with ranchers, they go to church with farmers, they live and breathe it, even if they're not directly impacted by it.
Right. And it's such a cute little town, and you can tell that it's maybe it needs some revitalization, and they must be so psyched that you all are coming in there to essentially do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a kind of a perfect case study of rural America, right? As farmers and ranchers had to consolidate because of efficiencies in the farming equipment and pricing points, we've seen this across America, right? Little farmers getting pushed out by big farmers. And so Fort Benton is a great example. It used to be a Class B school. So they were graduating, anywhere between 80 and maybe 100 kids per class. And it's just continued to dwindle. Now our graduating classes are 20 to 30 kids.
Oh, wow.
So that's just over the last generation, really. So Fort Benton really was booming. And when we go really far back in history, they say all roads lead out of Fort Benton, because this is where the fort was. And so this is where Lewis and Clark, this is as far as they could go up the river, essentially, where the fort was established, and all of the fur trading and everything that happened out here was kind of really started. So Fort Benton is, as I love to think of it, as the heart of Montana. And that really wasn't even that long ago either. In the grand scheme, in Pennsylvania, you guys have fantastic history. You got, the East Coast just has so much more maturity than the West Coast does, when we're only talking 100 plus years ago. And so it's crazy to me to think that only a few generations back, this was a much different town, but it was,
right.
It was booming, right? The Grand Union's the first hotels in Montana. You can get the feel of the Old West when you walk through it and stuff like that. So,
yeah, it's definitely a cool spot. So you, IND Hemp, you realize that, it's not just about IND Hemp, that there's a whole industry that needs help, right? We're growing the industry. Can you talk about sort of your leadership in the industry?
Yeah, I definitely will give my dad a lot of credit. He's just a fantastic guy that like has a heart for everybody and a big visionary. And that is really what we needed. You know, a lot of times, I'll get my hackles raised a little bit and get frustrated with him because I'm like, there's just no way we can do what you're asking me to do.
You want the impossible.
But then I, kind of settle myself and try to think about the big picture with him. And like I said, get from maybe plan A to plan B, and then he can take the rest to get us there. And so his leadership has really instilled in all of us in the company that like we have to be willing and able to go through some of these growing pains, not just for our business and the goals that we're trying to achieve, but the industry as a whole. And that philosophy of a rising tide will lift all ships. We have to live that out, and we have to be very intentional about it. Naturally, we're going to be, self-preservative and capitalistic at nature, right? We need to make money. We need to create opportunities for growth for our business. But there's such a big pie in the sky of like opportunity for, if we're talking acres, like just 5% of the United States commodity market. So mostly going to like corn, soybeans, wheat. If we just had 5% of that, that's like 8 million acres. That's huge, and so there's just this massive opportunity for the crop. And if we look at it only in the lane that we're never going to be able to penetrate anything close to that. But if collectively the industry starts working together more and starts being very intentional about every conversation you have, every shared piece of data, every lot that you're sending out, a very intentionality of like collectively, let's try to take a bite out of the piece of the pie, then we might actually get somewhere. And it's hard. I will definitely say it's against human nature to a point, because you're just like, oh, I don't want to share that, or I don't want to talk to that person, or whatever it is. Like you have to really kind of set yourself aside in your own natural sort of tendencies, and always align yourself with like, we have to be able to work together at this. Like we have to be able to see growth of the industry, not just growth of our company. And I think it will pay off. Like I do think maybe we won't make as much money, every year. Maybe our returns won't be as high as they could be, but it has to be more than just money. We have to make decisions that are more than just our people. Like it has to have global impact, communal impact. And that is really every conversation, every relationship has to be intentional about that.
Yeah. So I guess this is maybe a very simple question with a complicated answer, but why hemp? Is it because of the environmental impact? Is it why? Why is your dad so passionate about industrial hemp and seeing the industry flourish?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be fully transparent, and this may not be the answer that you or some of your listeners want to hear, but we're not hempsters. We weren't like drinking the Kool-Aid decades ago and like really seeing the value here. I'm definitely there now, but like I don't want to, not trying to paint a picture of what I am not. So I think hemp's a vehicle that like we wanted to make communal change, that global change we talked about. And hemp is the vehicle that allows us to do that. I think that the more we learn about the opportunities here, the more we see that we have pain points, whether it's our health as a society, whether it's our soil health, like in agriculture. When we start seeing these pain points, hemp just kind of can speak to a lot of them, if not all of them. And so we feel very blessed to be a part of the hemp industry, because I think philosophically we align with just about everyone on these things that we're trying to identify. We just didn't know that hemp was the vehicle that could make an impact on those things until we got into the industry. I think like Dad and I's background and our relationships and just kind of our exposure over our careers led us to a path in agriculture that we love. But again, like we kind of just happenstance to fall into hemp. I think that hemp, has a really bright future. Food, fiber, industrial products. There's so many things that we talk about it can really penetrate. And so the challenge is going to not just be why hemp, but why these products specifically as the industry grows, really finding our niches and value. But I think collectively, we just, as a company, are super thankful to be a part of the hemp industry and hope that we can do it justice and do the plant justice by trying to be a company that operates a little differently. So
I like that. I'll go with that.
sorry, I don't know if I answered that question or not, but it's hard to answer sometimes.
Right. I mean, I'm how do I'm a simpleton, right? And I think that I just want to see I don't know. For me, it's environmental. Like the climate is in crisis. We should have been doing things 30 years ago to combat climate change. This summer we drove around fires and droughts, and I don't know if the vision I have is maybe just too naive, but I would like to see, lots and lots of big stands of hemp sequestering carbon and locking it up into the soil and into products, and maybe that's like a science fiction kind of a future. Maybe hemp is just going to be part of everything, but I don't know. I'm not sure why I'm. Go ahead.
No, I think that's a great point. Maybe I would just challenge like hempsters and others that like you have this big vision of where hemp is. Absolutely, we can get there, but like I think we need to take a holistic approach to climate change, to health, to all of these pain points that whatever your passion is, it has to be a holistic approach because moderation in everything, even a moderation, right? And so like if we just say like, hey, like hemp is the only solution to fix global warming, then like eventually hemp's going to be a problem and there's going to be issues with hemp. And so if we've learned anything from history or anything of like, agricultural practices in the last several decades, it has to be a holistic approach. I think that's why regenerative farming, more and more people are really understanding and seeing that it may still be a ways off before we see it implemented on scales that can still impact, the food that is required to be produced. But I just would encourage people that like, absolutely, like for a lot of reasons, we need to be on the hemp train together and we need to be excited about our crop. But let's not like lose sight of like, there has to be a holistic approach to a lot of these things that we're passionate about. And let's not like squash everything else along the way. Corn and soy has a place in our society, and wheat has a place in agriculture, like everything in moderation. So
Right. Yeah, I don't think hemp is the only solution. I just think agriculture has to be part of the solution. And I think a lot of it is reducing emissions. So,
for sure.
Yeah. So this summer I was driving around the country and I found myself in Fort Benton, and you and your family were all very gracious and hospitable and invited us in. And you also invited a lot of other people there, and it turned into this like industry summit. Can you talk about that, like sort of the planning that went into that and what you hoped to get out of it?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely start with just thanks for making it out here. It's challenging to get to Montana in any way, which honestly I'm not too upset about because it keeps like the riff-raff out, I think. So you like really have to be like on your way to Montana. You have to be intentional to come to Fort Benton, so I appreciate your family making it out here. And everyone that made it out here. And so this idea definitely stimulated from your visit and Dad's vision to like, let's not just show Eric like what we've got going on here, but let's open it up for the industry leaders that we look to and open up the doors. Let's let people have a full view of what's going on in that intentional effort to be collaborative and to collectively grow the industry. So I have this like vision that just about everyone in the industry at some point will be at my house and I'll get to feed them dinner. And because we're very family oriented people, very try to stay humble and just like have a good meal. I may not be the best cook, but I throw my poor fiance on the grill when people show up, and he's lovingly embraced the life that we have thrown upon his doorstep. But I just love that idea of being able to serve people, and especially industry, titans that will get to always think like, yeah, I've been to the Elliott house. And so it was awesome to see everyone come, not just to my house, but to our facilities here to get to know our team. I'm so proud of the staff that we've been able to build. We're very fortunate to have passionate individuals. They're experts in their field. Ben is a fantastic example. I love Ben's hard work and his heart for the crop and his heart for our farmers. I love his family. So we're finding more people like Ben and Greg Tristan and Patrick, all these guys that are not only passionate about making a success story out of what we're doing here, but the industry as a whole. And so inviting industry people out to meet those people, see the ins and outs, the nuts and bolts of what we're doing. And then let's have some serious conversations. Like my personality, I like to just take the bull by the horns and like, if there's a problem, like, let's talk about it. If there's an elephant in the room, let's figure it out, because you're never going to get anywhere if we just continue to avoid those conversations. And so when Dad kind of came to Greg and I with this idea of inviting everyone out, I was like, well, the best thing that I think could come of this is to address some of those lingering issues that we all feel, yet none of us want to talk about them.
So what are those issues that we feel but we don't want to talk about?
Yeah, a couple of them that like still are pain points, I think. Quality and specifications for grain and fiber, but grain more right now just because like we're trying to learn. The Canadians obviously have a lot a head start on us. So a lot of the answers they've already figured out. And they're not simple answers. You just can't pull it from a book, right? When we talk about quality of the grain in the field, harvesting time, maturity of seeds, like what hulls better, what presses better, what's the taste and flavor profile we're going for, what's the dockage and grading amounts. I mean, these are all questions that have a metric to answer them, but they're not out there right now for us. And if they are, no one's really sharing them. And so, it was an opportunity. We had Victory Hemp Foods here. We had Colorado Hemp Works, a few other grain processors that just like, we're all seeing this. Working on the seed side, let's talk about yield. Like, seed dealers are fantastic about promoting the good things about their seeds. They're not so fantastic about talking about the challenges we see in their seed. And so we did variety trials this year, and we brought people out to dry land Montana agriculture. We said, this is like the hardest conditions to grow under. And if it can grow here, like we have some potential. And so, university trials are always great starting point, but like you need to see it on a 100-acre plot. You need to see it in strip testing. And that's when we can really start to put pressure back on, or not pressure, but let's just get feedback back to those genetics and those seed dealers of like, we really need some work here. And so these are all things that I think it definitely started the conversation, and we were like, oh, we align here and we're seeing the same thing here. And it was just good to have those conversations. At least you just feel like you're not the only one suffering through these things. And then hopefully we have less people who are having to go through those growing pains and are a little less bloody on the other side of the fight, kind of thing.
Right. What other sort of pain points did you identify and then get to discuss with other industry folks that day?
Yeah. So, this is probably a broken record for a lot of people. Definitely some of your listeners that have listened to a lot of your shows. Regulations is tough for us. We've come so far. So I don't want to just like beat on this that like we haven't accomplished anything, because we've accomplished a lot. But there's just a lot more to go. I'm personally really passionate about animal feed and animal feed regulations. We're very active in the Hemp Coalition. And so education of that, and let's partner and align each other with the talking points. So when we get to legislators, when we have the opportunity to discuss with your congressmen or your senators or your governors, let's really show let's peel back the onion a little bit and show them what our pain points are there. And if we're running the right path, FDA absolutely is there for a reason, and I'm not suggesting otherwise. But let's put the pressure on them a little bit of they are hindering our industry in ways that many people will not be able to sustain. The business models won't make sense if FDA continues to put pressure on like they are. And at the end of the day, FDA is just people too, right? They're educated experts in their field, and they have the power to do a lot of good. But let's put them in the place that we need just collaboration with regulators. And we need to be confident and ambitious to go after this industry and capitalize on the market opportunity that United States has, right? We have domestic supply chain opportunities here. It would just be wrong of us to think regulators are stifling that for reasons that they maybe not fully understand. I've been in on several phone calls with FDA, CVM, and the lack of knowledge and it's not anyone's fault, right? We're a very new industry. but the lack of knowledge and data, and then their desire to only have US grown and US processed and US research, that's very stifling to an industry. And so let's try and peel back the onion a little bit, share more with them. So regulations was a big conversation because I think that the industry has to have a collective voice when we talk to people. It cannot just be IND Hemp up in Montana or someone else in Pennsylvania. Like, it needs to be collective. So that was a big thing we talked about too. And then just customer and market, case studies, right? People need to be able to see like the full picture, and we have to do a good job of an industry of communicating that in a way that not only investors see the opportunity, right? Because we need investors to really take our industry seriously, but we also need to have just like everyday you and me, like eating our products and talking with our farmers and communicating the opportunity in hemp so that we're not a stigma anymore. And we're not just this, fly by the night product. Like, we want to be here to stay. We want to make lifelong change. And that requires all of us on several levels to be aware and then hopefully, participating in the industry in some way.
Right. I remember, I'm not sure if it was Chad Rosen or Ben, what's Ben's last name? I want to say Ben Raymond. One of them said, "We're making food, not edibles." And it was like really just a poignant comment about how, it's not the CBD industry. Like, why are the fiber and grain sides of this being held to those, just sort of ridiculous testing standards? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's a great comment. I definitely don't want to throw the CBD like part of the industry under the bus because they've definitely come a long ways.
Sure.
But one of the takeaways out of our little summit was, there is a lot of reason for us to be arm's length away from that side of the industry. We need to start having communications that like grain and fiber is a much different product, not only from like day one in the seed, we're talking like seed costs. I think we sold seed this year, like $3.25 a pound, and like there's CBD seeds that's like $9 a seed, right? Like, well, this is exponential differences. So not only at the start of the seed, but then like really the end consumer. I can't tell you how many conversations it starts off with like, oh, well, we produce hemp seed oil. And I'm very specific to say hemp seed oil. And they're like, oh yeah, I think my grandma's using that. Like, or yeah, I saw that at the gas station the other day. Like, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had like that. And again, it's nothing against the CBD industry. Like, they didn't start that. They didn't, have any allusion to the customer. It's just like lack of information and just natural tendencies of the consumer itself. But there's a lot of reasons why we should have an arm's length away, just to make clarity of what we're trying to achieve here, what they're trying to achieve there. Because like FDA, a great example is we had our chicken, Hemp Coalition put forth an application for AFCO to get chicken laying hens for hemp seed meal, which hemp seed meal is a byproduct of the oil that's being pressed, and it doesn't have cannabinoids in it. That's just naturally not there in the seed. And we test for it. It's non-detect at 50 parts per million. Like, we cannot find it. It's not there. And FDA continues to push on us of like, well, what if it is there? Like, let's look harder. And how do we know a chicken's not going to get upset? And what happens to the egg? And it's like, this is from our side of the business. Like, we're just a regular, like, that's hemp seed meal is a product that's sold at a price point that I have to compete with soybean meal. You know how cheap soybean meal is? Like, you cannot put these restrictions on me and expect us as an industry to put forth an application when like that's your job to figure out what CBD is, because I didn't apply for CBD. I applied for hemp seed meal. So I get super upset about stuff like that. And so having some delineation in the industry, I think, would help us all. It would at least let us get some of that lower hanging fruit. Let's try to tackle some of that. We definitely can get to cannabinoids and other opportunities with the plant. But that's just a long road, but let's try and monetize and make value along the way. So.
I recently heard a statistic. I think this is from data from, New Frontier Data, a research company in the cannabis space, that CBD users are twice as likely to buy other hemp products than non-CBD users. So I hear you in not wanting to throw the CBD people under the bus because, it's connected, but such very different aspects of this industry.
Yeah, CBD like blew the door open in so many ways. Like it took the stigma out from a lot of people, because forever we were talking like hemp and marijuana. Now it's like, okay, well, we're one step away from that. Now we're hemp and CBD. And so that's a step in the right direction, and it blew the door open for conversation. But now I feel like we're past that. And unfortunately, I feel like it's holding us back more than it is, pushing us forward. So there's a political like way that this can work. Like we can all be friends. We can all work in the same space. There is a way for us to be successful. I just think like grain and fiber, we're so small right now. Like we are just so small. I think another thing that was discussed at the summit was just, we have an identity crisis as an industry. We think we're these like head honchos that walk in and like people in government are going to listen to us and like we've got a seat at the table, but we don't, right? We're so small. And I come from big ag. Like ADM is one of the biggest companies that works in agriculture. And they manage and they, I don't want to say manipulate, but like they definitely have a role to play in the price of corn every day and the price of soy every day. And so like, how are we thinking that we're at the table with companies like that when like, I think IND Hemp grew the most acres for grain last year in the United States, like as a single company contracting, and we contracted, 10,000 acres. So like put those into perspective, like, we're like soy's at 90 million acres, like, not even having a percentage. So
yeah, right.
Well, I just want to say, like, even though we have an identity crisis right now, and we are smaller than a lot of these players, but we still do have a voice, and people are taking it seriously. National Hemp Association is getting some really great meetings for us in DC. We are like, Montana passed a bill this past legislative session, approving hemp seed meal or hemp products for animal feed and pets, especially pets and horses. I mean, we are getting momentum and people are listening. So I don't want to say that we don't have traction. We do. I just think that like recognizing the size of our industry and then hopefully reaching out to industry partners, right? Like we don't need to tackle the entire USDA by ourselves. We don't have to tackle FDA by ourselves. Let's realize that like where we have gaps and blind spots as an industry, and let's try and fill those with other partners, whether it's in the automotive side or the industrial side of, building materials. Like there's just a lot of partners out there that have done this and have been successful. We should look to them to help us along the way instead of trying to do everything by ourselves as an industry.
Yeah. What else came out of that meeting there on that Tuesday?
For IND Hemp personally, we have been holding back really aligning with any industry kind of partners because there's just been some drama, naturally in like the associations and kind of trade groups in the industry. So we've kind of just taken a back seat and kind of waited to see where the chips would fall. And so we've aligned with National Hemp Association. I think that they have done a great job of recognizing that need for distinction between grain and fiber and cannabinoids. And so we're really looking to them for some leadership and opportunities, like I said, to collectively have a voice that goes to DC and other offices and other industry partners. So we're excited about that. And just this I think friendship and bond that kind of came out of, we brought some people that have been in the industry for a long time that have really been waiting to see, like scalable production and sizable opportunities. And so to be able to come to Montana and see that like, hey, I think we've done it. I think we are on the right path. Like we're processing those 10,000 acres. We're contracting for more. We're building more infrastructure to support this. I think that was really cool for people to see that have been in the industry for so long and have been talking about it for a while. Maura Spiegel was there and Joy Becker was there, and she and him both were, they've been advocates for the industry for a long time. And so it's fun to see their faces and their excitement around what we're doing here. And I hope that they got the impression that this was an opportunity for all of us to count a little victory. It's not just ours to toot our horn about. This is like an industry win. And I hope people see that and will always remember that, we're not out here just like chirping our horn about IND Hemp, but we really want to see everyone kind of get some reinforcement and encouragement from the little victories like this that we have. So.
Oh, I felt that. Yeah. It felt, I mean, I went, I was there in my capacity as a hemp podcaster, like that's even a thing is bizarre, but and then the only other media there were other podcasters, which was kind of neat. So, Morris, Joy, and I had some solidarity. But I was set up to record interviews. I thought I would capture some content and all that. But I realized once it got started that I just needed to get out of the way and let the industry talk to people. So I sort of like assumed the role of, fly on the wall and just observed. And it felt historic. Like it felt like, someday, 10 years from now, people will point to that day and say, something happened there. That's where it really like gelled. And it was fantastic. It was more than I ever, could have imagined back when I, just started making a podcast about hemp. So it's neat to be sort of on, I guess, the ground floor and to witness history. So yeah, thank you for having me out there.
Yeah. Well, I think all of us are really fortunate to be a part of something like this, because in our lifetime, like there may not be, I doubt there's any other real, especially in agriculture, I doubt there's any more commodities or crops that come up that like really take the full spectrum of like an industry has to be established. So I'm just like blown away so many times of like, how did we land here? Like, how cool is it? And I'm sure you have moments of that too, where you just think like, wow. So I don't take it for granted for sure. And then I just, try to not get wrapped up in the day-to-day of like overwhelming amount of work. Like it is absolutely overwhelming. And instead just to like do the best we can every day, do the most we can. And, like I'm a firm believer that you learn more failing than you do succeeding. Not saying that I want to fail by any means, but, when we have setbacks in operation or we have setbacks in the crop, in the farm or whatnot, we learn so much more when we have those setbacks than if everything were to go swimmingly. And so I just don't get too discouraged when we have those, because they happen a lot. And just like think that, we're a lot smarter today than we were yesterday. And to not, miss the opportunity to be grateful for that. So.
Amen to that. Morgan Elliott, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. It was a pleasure being on here. Just really enjoyed seeing your face again, and I'm glad you're home and safe and you guys are ready to take on the next adventure. But man, we're sure pumped to have you a part of the industry and tell our story and encourage people along the way.
Yeah, so that's Morgan Elliott from IND Hemp. And as you may have picked up from this interview, something really special happened that day. It was July 27th. It was a Tuesday. It was Fort Benton, Montana. Folks from all over the country came there to talk about the fiber and grain industry, really like hash things out, figure out what the problems are, what the opportunities are, and what needs to happen going forward. So over the next few weeks, I'm going to be interviewing people who were there and then putting that together in hopes of reconstructing that day. Because I think more people need to know about it, more people need to hear the progress that was made. So look for that. I hope to have that episode published and to you by sometime in October. So until then, I will be publishing other regular interviews. Got some fun things coming up for you. So yeah, thank you again for listening to our podcast. I love making this show. I love talking about hemp, and I love that you listen to it. So if you ever have any questions for me, you want to get in touch with me, whatever, send an email. You can send it to podcast@lancasterfarming.com, or you can call me up and leave me a message and I'll call you back, 717-721-4462. Be sure to check out lancasterfarming.com. You can sign up for our hemp newsletter there. And also you can get a subscription and you can get our wonderful newspaper delivered to you either into your mailbox or your driveway, or you can get the digital version. So anyway, lancasterfarming.com is the place for you. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Thanks again for listening to our show, and until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper. Or Raleigh, North Carolina. Oh, hey, one more thing. I'm publishing some videos of the tour of the fiber plant in Fort Benton, Montana, so go check that out at lancasterfarming.com.
Industrial hemp.
Episode 155 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2021 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, which is part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show is written and recorded, edited, and produced by yours truly, Eric Harlock, and any music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.